Hello, everybody. So it is I, Miss Corey. We're going to talk about U1-L2 Background to the Last Samurai. There's quite a bit of information to go through, so I'll go pretty fast. But if you have any questions, just let me know on email or come to my office hours. All right, so your job, you're going to watch this Ed puzzle and answer the questions that pop up. Questions that I want you to answer on just the Ed puzzle will be in blue text, and questions that I want you to answer in your study guide. Okay, so under the lesson 2 section of your study guide, you're going to answer the questions that are in magenta text. All right, your learning targets is to describe the development of civilizations in Eastern Asia. We're going to be focusing on Japan and analyze the emergence, development, and impact of the philosophies of this era. All right, here's a map of Japan. So it's located in the far, far east of Asia. Here's a closer picture of Japan. So you can see it's made up of a bunch of little islands. There's 4 main islands total, with Tokyo being the capital. So, first question, just answer this one on the Ed puzzle. When you hear samurai, what do you think of? All right, there might be a few things you think of, like Japanese portraits of samurai. You might think of like some really old photographs of samurai when they were like the last ones to be around. This guy's actually an actor back in like the 1920s. He wasn't a real samurai, but this is like the armor of a samurai. Here is a real armor of a samurai. You might think of their swords or even their wooden practice swords. All right. So in Japanese culture, kind of like social hierarchy, this is how it goes. So the emperor's on top, but he's actually not the one that typically has all the power. He's more of like a figurehead. So kind of think of like, well, now it's the King of England, right? I mean, he has like a little bit of influence over politics, but not a whole lot. That really falls to, like, in England would be like the prime minister. So in Japan, that would fall to the shogun or the daimyos. Um, they're the ones with the real power, not necessarily the emperor. And the below them are the samurai warriors. And that kind of depends on the time period. We'll talk about it in just a bit of like where they kind of lie on the social hierarchy. And then, of course, you have peasants and merchants at the very bottom. All right, so the rise of samurai. So, samurai literally means one who serves. They existed from the 1100s until 1876. That's when they were outlawed. In the 1100s, they were considered warriors for hire. So, at that time, Japan was split up between like kind of a bunch of different rulers, and the national government didn't have their own army, so landowners had to protect their own property, and that's where they would go and hire these samurai to help protect their property. So lords, who are people appointed by the national government to look over a large area of land, were the main employers of samurai at first. So lords in Japan, of course, we don't call them lords. We call them daimyos. Daimyos needed to protect their peasants. They needed to protect their farmland, and of course, they needed to protect themselves from rival lords that were around them and who wanted to come and steal their land. All right, so here's kind of a picture of Japan. I kind of put it up here just to show you how split up it was between different lords. So there definitely wasn't a strong centralized government at this point. Pretty much the power fell to these daimyos. All right, so in 1180 to 1185, there was something called the Genpei War, and that overthrew the Japanese government at the time. It was called the Heian government, and established a new military government called the Kamakura Shogunate. And this is where, so the shogunate, um, so like kind of the new government, they place samurai as warrior and soldiers for the government. They're like, okay, like lords or daimyos. You can't hire them anymore. We're going to hire them on and have them as kind of like the national army almost. Because of this, the samurai, some samurai, not all of them, let's make that really clear, did become very wealthy and they gained a lot of high status. But of course, not all samurai were rich or the upper tier of society. Actually, most were quite poor. Most samurai were just considered foot soldiers, so they didn't have any like fancy armor or like cool houses to live in. So Ronin were samurais without master or did not was not accepted by a master. Like they tried to get someone to hire them, but no one would. So they would just kind of like travel around and search for work. All right, so question number 1, I want you to write this in your study guide, okay? So where it says question 1, write this answer. What were the roles of samurai? Okay, so I'm going to skip a few years in Japanese history, or else we'll be here all day. So Japan has a warring states period from 1467 to 1650. That's where the daimyos and some clans were like in a big battle fight over the control of Japan. Um, they ended up going to like a series of civil wars, and there was a lot of changes in the Japanese government and who owned what land and who was loyal to who. It was just a messy period. But there is hope for Japan to reunite at this time, okay? All they needed was a bigger enemy than themselves. Ooh, any guesses on what that enemy will be that reunites Japan? I bet you didn't see this one coming, or maybe you did because we're going to watch The Last Samurai. But it's actually the United States. Yay! Oh, good old United States. Yeah. So, uh, yeah, the United States threatened Japan quite a bit. Also, Britain and Russia are in there too. So, Japan unites. So, before 1792, Japan had a very unstable central government. They had very little contact with the rest of the world. Like the only like other friends they really had was China and Korea. They had really strict laws that no one could trade with other countries. There was black market marketing and pirating that did occur, especially with like the Dutch. And again, it didn't have a centralized government to import, export, or regulate goods. So there was really no way to like control like an economy that is outside of Japan. So in 1792, Russia and Britain were like, hey, we're just going to go sit on the shores of Japan. And the daimyos were like, ah, snap. If we came and they like started attacking us and we don't have any like central military force, they're totally going to like dominate us. So Japan then unites under 2 daimyos. That is called the Satsuma and the Choshu clans. Or yeah. And they built up a united army, arsenal, and shipyard. So they have a little bit of defense just in case they ever got like attacked by the British. And their capital then is moved to Edo, which today we call Tokyo. All right. Oop, the United States is back. So the US is here. So Matthew C. Perry, he's from the US Navy. He comes to Japan's shores with the US Navy fleet, just casually unannounced, just takes a fleet of military ships to Japan. In 1853, Japan is like, oh snap, the US is here. So Perry pretty much gets off the ships and he commands the Japanese to be like, you need to trade with the West right now. So in 1854, Japan signs a treaty with the US and other Western countries to do trading. This is called the Treaty of Kanagawa. All right, so Japanese merchants are really angry that the government let Westerners come in for trading. So like the British and the United States treated foreigners really bad. The British and French governments were like, whoa, like, or I should say this, they treated each other bad. The Japanese also treated the Westerners bad too. So the British and French governments were like, what the heck, Japan? Don't treat our merchants so poorly. Like you're the one like we're trading with. We're making money. So in retaliation, Britain and France bombed um, like a whole strip of of a beach in southwest coast of Japan in an 1864 rebellion. They're mad, so what do? You just, I guess, bomb the coastline of your enemy. All right. So the economic and physical pressure of Western forces led to the overthrowment of the Japanese government. This leads to something called the Meiji Restoration. Now, there's a lot of information about the Meiji Restoration. This isn't even barely touching it. So, Meiji Restoration was from 1868 to 1894. Here's the Meiji Emperor right here. You can see he's adopted Western clothes. This is the time period when Japan fully embraces ideas and cultures from other countries. All right. So The Last Samurai, it takes a place in about 1877. It is during the Meiji Restoration then. So it is really loosely based off of the events of the Satsuma Rebellion, which I'll talk about in just a second. Um, the movie is definitely historical fiction. So the vast majority of characters are not real, if any of them are real. I don't think any of them are. Anyway, it's also the plot is totally made up and Hollywoodized. This is a Tom Cruise movie. What do you expect? All right, Meiji Restoration. So that was from 1868 to 1894. Again, that was a total change in the Japanese government. Meiji Tenno became the new emperor. The emperor saw Britain and France colonizing China, and Europeans completely controlled China's government. They exploited the Chinese people for labor. The Europeans exploited China's land for resources. And pretty much Emperor Meiji saw this. It was like, I do not want this to happen to Japan. So Emperor Meiji decides to make treaties with the Western countries. They made one with the United States. They decided to do the United States because the U.S. was an anti-colonizer since they were a colony themselves. Although they did do, it's a hard topic. You know what? We'll just leave it at that for simplicity. The U.S. also had a strong military. They also forced to become allies after U.S.'s Matthew Perry threatened to attack Japan. So they're pretty much forced to make a treaty with the United States. So question 2, write this in your study guide. Why did the U.S. and Japan become allies? All right, so if The Last Samurai takes place in 1877, what happened about 12 years before this in the United States? Yes, it is the US Civil War. I'm sure you all have learned about it. I know I got a couple of ninth graders in this class, but I know you learned about it in middle school. Okay, at least you know the basics of it. So the US Civil War, that was from 61 to 65, North Union versus South Confederacy. The North won, slavery was abolished. After the Civil War, there was something called Reconstruction. That's when Union soldiers occupied the South to make sure they were following new anti slavery and the economy rules. So Reconstruction ended in 1877, and the US had a bunch of military leaders and soldiers without jobs. They also had an excess of firearms and other war supplies. So they decided to send military leaders to Japan to help trade their new allies in Western warfare, which is like pretty much like the biggest like reason why Tom Cruise is in The Last Samurai, like his character is. So the US trained Japanese soldier recruits in the Western warfare. Beforehand, firearms were really scarce in Japan, and warfare was based off of swords and horses. So the US helped supply Japan with weapons and training for the US military leaders. They also benefited Japan by modernizing them for more powerful warfare. It also readied Japan if another European colonizer wanted to invade Japan, um, although the US kind of did that themselves. And also, the guns were more powerful than the rebel samurai with swords. So, question 3, write this in your study guide. How did the US help the Meiji government modernize their military? All right. So, not all Japanese were on board being allies with the United States, okay? They wanted to live in their traditional ways that they have been living for over 200 years. There was a lot of rebellions. Most of them were led by former samurais, who were again banned in 1868. Like, no one could be a samurai, like, totally outlawed. The biggest rebellion was the Satsuma Rebellion in 1877. And that's what The Last Samurai is loosely, like, super loosely based off of. So the Satsuma Rebellion, so a guy named Saigo Takamori was the leader. That's him right here. He was a former noble and a military leader. He also opposed westernization of Japan. Saigo gained a following of former samurais that just didn't want to be friends with the West, and also led a rebellion against the central government, um, who then, like the samurai army, and then so the central government sent their newly trained army that the US helped train to defeat them. There's a series of 3 battles. You can learn more about it if you want to. I'm just giving you like the quick basics here. But Saigo and the samurais were eventually killed in the Battle of Shiroyama, ending the rebellion. It's unsure if he was killed or he committed seppuku at the very end. All right, let's talk about some characters in the movie. So the main character is Nathan Algren. You can see his picture up here, aka it's Tom Cruise. So it's Civil War. He's a Civil War and an American Indian War vet. He's haunted by his treatment towards the Native Americans that he killed. He also agrees to help the Meiji government train the troops. You'll see that he gets paid like a lot of money to do so. But in his adventures, he gets captured by Lord Moritsugu Katsumoto and taken to a village where Nathan learns the life of samurai. Oh, wow. Okay, so Lord Katsumoto, so he's based off of Saigo Takamori, like we just talked about, the guy who led the rebellion. Yeah, it's loosely based off of him. He was Emperor Meiji's prized teacher. He was a former daimyo, and he was the leader, or he is the leader of the rebellion in the movie. There's also Taka. She's the younger sister of Lord Katsumoto, and she is the widow of a samurai that Nathan killed. And then there's Nubotada Katsumoto, who is Lord Katsumoto's son. He becomes friends with Nathan and teaches him Japanese culture. There's also Captain or Colonel, whatever, Bagley. That's Nathan's former commanding officer in the American Indian Wars. He sees samurai as not civilized. He also trains Meiji government troops in Western warfare. And then there's Amura. He is Meiji Emperor's advisor. He supports westernization. He wants to make money off Japanese railroads. He also wants to eliminate all the samurai. All right, wrap up. So we learned the history of the samurai and the original purpose. We learned about the Meiji Restoration. We learned about the US and Japan becoming allies. We talked about the Satsuma Rebellion and some characters in the movie. So next up, this is what you need to do. You need to watch U1-L3, Warrior Graveyard Ed Puzzle. Make sure you watch it all the way to the end, or else Ed Puzzle doesn't like communicate with School G right, and you don't get points for it, and that would be really sad. So make sure you watch it all the way to the end. Answer the questions that pop up during the video into your study guide. I think there's going to be 5 of them. After that, you're going to watch the U1-L4, The Last Samurai. That's 0 to 30 minutes. Make sure you fill out your study guide in the lessons like 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 section. Make sure your permission slip is also signed before you watch Last Samurai. Most of you have it done. I will definitely alert you if you don't. Let's see here. Oh yeah, questions, want to learn more? You can email me or come to office hours from 12 to 1. All right, cool. That's all I got. See ya. Bye.